how to read, tips for reading better, different ways of reading deeply, not quickly. Many of us want to know how to become better readers, as in how to develop the ability to engage with what you're reading on a deeper level. And of course, everybody tells you that to read better or even to read more, all you have to do is read. Like if you want to speak better English when English is not your native language, all you have to do is practice speaking in English. And that's true. I couldn't agree more. But I'm not going to tell you that. Instead, I'm going to give you something different, something that has worked for me and something that I have applied to my reading. I realized this when I was reading Beloved by Toni Morrison, but it was later that I came across the actual term for it, and that is close reading. It's when you focus on the language and details of the text. Now, Morrison's prose is very intricate and her narrative has many layers. So that kind of reading demands such close attention to detail and symbolism, which is a very important part of this novel, all of her novels in fact. Moving on to literal reading. Here I think it's accurate for me to mention all of Ernest Hemingway's books, especially The Old Man and the Sea. Literal reading is understanding the literal meaning of the words without diving deep or making a lot of effort. So you simply read the straightforward prose like that of Hemingway and you take away just that literal understanding. For example, I did not show you The Old Man and the Sea. That's the book. For example, let me find a passage. His choice had been to stay in the deep dark water, far out beyond all snares and traps and treacheries. My choice was to go there to find him beyond all people in the world. Now we are joined together and have been since noon, and no one to help either one of us. Now, the deliberate use of words like deep dark water, I think, snares, traps, treacheries, now they indicate the old man's decision to head out into the deep waters, which is a very challenging and isolated environment. The repetition of beyond all people, this shows his distance and separation from society, his desire for solitude even. So just like this, you don't have to dig deep with Hemingway. And I think for the most part, he writes what he means and means what he writes. And then we have reflective reading. So reflective reading involves reading the text on a more personal level. That's when you consider how it relates to your own experiences and your own feelings. Recently, I did that with Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. The fact that he spoke so openly and wisely, I guess, of his experiences as a prisoner living in a concentration camp really made me question my very resistance to looking at the tough times of life from a different perspective. So I was not only reading the words that were written, but I was also reflecting on what those words meant, which in the case of this book is to consciously live as meaningful a life as possible. Then the fourth type of reading is interactive reading. Now, this can be done on your own, as in you can do this alone as well. So I usually engage with a book by annotating it. This means using post-its, writing in the margins of the pages, underlining sentences, and writing down my thoughts as I'm reading. And you can talk about the book with someone else as well. I usually do that with my sister, Aisha. So that not only has helped me understand the book better, but I often tend to remember all the important bits of the book, all the things that struck a personal chord with me. So in the long run, I remember it well too. A good book to do this with is If on a Winter's Night, A Traveler by Italo Calvino. Now the structure of this book is fragmented and I feel like it's always changing. So the book forces you to actively engage with the story, the characters, and the narrative. You have to piece it all together and you have to look for different meanings and elements to talk about. And finally, and this is something that will come very naturally to you as it did to me, what I'm talking about is multimodal or visual reading. So that is when we read graphic novels and mangas. What I read was Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This is visual storytelling with a very powerful message. The reason why we read such books is that I believe it's easier to understand complex information in a more straightforward manner. You can make connections between ideas and understand them more deeply. And since it's all visual, you remember it vividly too. So yeah, reading different kinds of books has also made me a better reader. And that way I read each book differently. So you see, even though the process of reading stays the same, how I read changes. We read deeply for varied reasons, most of them familiar. That we cannot know enough people profoundly enough, that we need to know ourselves better, that we require knowledge not just of self and others, but of the way things are.